All right, well, thanks for coming, everybody. Tonight's topic is blogging and your bottom line. So tonight we're going to be focusing a lot more on sort of like the content and management and focus aspects of blogging and the technical end of things, which have been covered before in other Joomla Chicago meetings, and we'll touch on some aspects of that, but mostly this is going to not look at the technical end of things. Tonight's talk is really kind of a curated discussion. Everybody here should feel free to raise your hand, speak up, yell at me, interrupt, whatever. You know, don't hold back. That's totally fine with me. I may, however, try to steer the conversation back on track just so we can get through the topic matter, you know, if we go a little bit too far afield. But do feel free to participate, and I'll be asking for your participation at certain times. And there will be a pop quiz at the end of the hour. So just to introduce myself, a little bit about me so you kind of understand the context that I'm approaching this from. I have a background in journalism and in online journalism. I'm a Northwestern University graduate, Medill School of Journalism in '93. Also, same year as Kat, my fellow alumnus. Although you were what school? You weren't journalism, you were... Oh, theater. Oh, theater. Yes, Kat was a... Yes, she did. She sure did. So my early career, I worked as a reporter, copy editor, and I also had a couple columns for the Times newspaper, which is a South suburban newspaper down in Northwest Indiana, and also a couple of the South suburbs. And starting in 1994, I began working as their online editor, and I helped bring their newspaper content online. Actually, it was so early in the industry that we didn't do it as a website that day. We did it as a dial-up BBS. So, you know, really old school technology, but it was really a cool experience being an online editor, and we actually launched one of the first online newspapers in the US at the time. Moved to the Tribune in the mid-90s and worked there for a handful of years in a variety of capacities, building syndicated online products, working for a Tribune-owned TV station in Denver, bringing them online, doing a bunch of like national level online community platform management and a bunch of like national level chats. And for a while, Tribune and AOL had this weird partnership, so we were doing these like celebrity chats with the Tribune's WB network stars. And so I got my most famous chat was Lucy Lawless, you know, Xena warrior princess. That was probably my most popular online live chat. So all, you know, old school technology back in the day, huh? And then, you know, after Tribune, I've had a couple of, filled a variety of roles, consulting, also a couple of department head level things at creative agencies and internet startups. I've been involved in a not-for-profit organization called The Site of Big Shoulders, which is a not-for-profit online magazine that features Chicago arts. We've actually been publishing since 1996. Our site currently runs on Joomla, and that kind of allows me to keep my hand in the publishing and kind of creative end of things while I crank out websites for clients. So I still get a little bit of activity in publishing. And then I've been doing blogging in a couple of different contexts, both for myself and Protograph Interactive, and trying to get, you know, interest and a little piece of the action for myself, as well as for some other companies, in particular Alluent Group, helped them out with business development, kind of got them going with a blog for about over the past 9 months or so. Also some guest blogs for like the CMS Association, which is associated with the CMS Expo, which takes place every spring. And then I've written some articles for the Joomla Community Magazine, some other outlets. I've got an article coming out soon for the Software Developers Journal on Joomla, and hopefully will be coming out in a couple weeks. And then I currently work as an independent consultant, you know, with my small boutique company, Protograph Interactive, although most of the time I'm changing diapers. I have a 23-month-old, and so I'm trying to get him out of the diapers, actually, and onto the big boy potty, and we'll see how that goes. And slow process so far. But so I've been doing a lot of Joomla stuff, but then also I've been the primary caregiver for my kids, so, you know, kind of been in and out of things in that way. So we're talking about blogging. Let's touch on like what is a blog, or, you know, what are the characteristics of what a blog is. And to me, a blog is basically a list of posts, you know, arranged from the most recent to the least recent. Another characteristic of a blog, I think, is that it's regularly updated. Blog content, typically it's a headline and some intro text, oftentimes leading to like a read more link that leads to the full article. Usually there's a date line for blog content, so people will say when a piece of blog content is posted and have that posted next to the content. I'd say another key aspect of blogs is commenting and having a comment system associated with each blog post. And I'd say that's one of the things that distinguishes like a blog post from an article, is that other people can comment on it. Certainly, another key element of blogs is SEO support, or effective blogs is SEO support, and being able to leverage or publish your blog content in a way that it's very friendly and accessible to search engines, both from the standpoint of meta tags as well as the type of text you use to describe things. And then there might be other bloggy features, like you got the blog roll with links to other websites. You've got word clouds, maybe a search feature. So that's kind of like, to me, what blogs are. I mean, do you guys have any other specific feedback, like what comprises a blog? Yes.
So blog was started in Chicago?
No, tell us.
First blog was started here in Chicago. I forget the guy's name, but he started. I'm sorry, big picture.
First blog in Chicago.
First blog was in Chicago. I got that bullet point. He started it out. It was a log of what he saw on the web. When the web was new and spread out, and there were no real directories, and he would send these emails to people, and then he started posting them and sending them out as emails. But this was the first blog, was a guy in Chicago.
That's interesting. So is this like 90s, late 90s, something like that?
Yeah, and he would send it out as a blog, like his web blog was his blog.
Okay.
And he would send that out, and this is interesting, and he would send people to neat stuff. And a lot of thought leaders were on his mailing list because he had a print mailing list that he would send out. Just like one of these weird people who would send, people he would meet, he would send them a little newsletter all the time.
Nice.
And so, like.
So how much money did he make off his blog?
Yeah. So that's not the point.
Yes.
But so the first blog was in Chicago, and it was a log of what was on the web. And so I think a lot of people
web log.
Forget, yes. So a lot of people forget to put links into their blog entries.
Yes. Oh, that's true. So
way to make friends and influence people.
So that's another characteristic of blogs, is talking about other stuff, linking out.
Curating.
Sure. Yeah, curating what's going on in your market or in the web in general.
That's blogging.
Well, one of the things that we're going to talk about tonight, and I kind of wanted to get into, and I have some ideas for it, and I welcome your suggestions as well, but like the concept of generating an overall focus for your blog. I mean, I'm assuming that everybody's here because you have an interest in blogging or want to learn more about it. And I want to, specify that tonight we are talking about commercial blogging. This is different than personal blogging, literary blogging, sharing blog stuff with your family. This is blogging as a business activity to achieve specific measurable results. So because we're taking this focus, or we're looking at a blog in the context of this marketing, and many times it's part of what's called an inbound marketing campaign, or it's a key component of an inbound marketing campaign, figuring out the overall focus for what you want to talk about really gets to the heart of your organization's overall marketing and communications. What are you selling or providing? To whom are you selling or providing this stuff? What are your competitive differentiators? In other words, why would you be the choice for whatever product and service you're selling versus someone else? And then I think you also want to consider how your own self-portrayals of yourself and organization will affect your perceived brand. Now, all of these elements are essential for, not just blogging, but for any real marketing communication strategy for an overall organization. You want to think about this stuff and kind of figure out, okay, as an organization, we need to connect with these people. How are we going to talk to them? And so that these decisions would tie into other types of marketing and communications language. So your reason for having a blog should be tied to the outcomes you want to get to it, or get from it. Ultimately, as part of an inbound marketing strategy, a blog should deliver concrete, measurable results. For example, one of the results that a measurable result that a blog could bring is increased traffic to your website. Another measurable result would be sales leads, or people who find you because of your blog content, and then using Google Analytics and other tracking and things that Avery is actually an expert in and can answer more questions about, you'd be able to track the people who find you through your blog, but then actually get converted to sales opportunities, or in other words, they get put into the sales funnel at the top of the funnel, or I've heard it called tofu sometimes. There might be, e-newsletter signups might be another metric that you could use for measuring the things you want to get out of your blog. You might also get some benefit from cross-promotion from other entities. If you publish real compelling blog content, other people might start linking to you. And when people start doing that, that's gold as far as the referrers go, and then as raising your page rank. And I assume that's still valid, right, Avery, in terms of?
That's the only way it works.
Right, so if more people linking to you, the better. And so what are some other potential benefits that we could get from a blog? Let's hear from, what do you guys think? Anything else? Maybe, of course, customers, I don't know. Yeah, Estelle.
Credibility, because you have really cool stuff.
Yes, absolutely. You can demonstrate your credibility through it. And there might be some other, depending on the industry and what you're selling and what you're doing, there might be some other specific things that you can measure and look at. One thing that is critical in order to be able to get these benefits from your blog is to integrate what is called a call to action with your blog content. And sometimes it's called a call to action, sometimes it's called converting a user from just a regular user to someone who is a potential customer. But basically, you want to get the person to fill out a form or provide some piece of information about themselves or something, even an email address that you can then capture and then start to use to build a potential customer profile around that person, put into your sales funnel, start sending them offers and marketing, et cetera. And you do that with a whole bunch of customers, and as I'm sure everybody knows, you move them through the sales funnel and gigs drop out the bottom, or fundraising opportunities or whatever that it might be. So these can be things like, click to download our free case study, click here to download to sign up. I don't know, what else is effective for that sort of stuff? Free ebooks, we did that for Aliment.
Content,
yeah.
Really effective. And having something that whether it's an ebook, and a lot of people, the ebook is the result of their blog.
Yeah, so it's a collection
A
of.
lot of people's books are the result of their blog.
Right.
Ebook.
They generate the content and collect it together and digest it.
There's a great amount of content reuse.
There might also be just, I think there's something to be said just about, hey, if you're interested in this topic, we do this and we can help you. Click here to let us help you, or just find our contact page. Sometimes even the straight up.
Like, there's the site Stumble Upon. People stumble
Right.
upon blog content, and so they want to keep up with it. So offering an email newsletter, offering an RSS feed, different ways to contact people, like passive ways that they can contact you and become part of your network.
Now, thank you, Avery. In order to, part of assessing all of this stuff, what you want to do is you want to compare the costs of blogging and doing all of this stuff versus the return that you get for it. So you want to get a return on investment for your blogging activity. Now, one thing that I want to mention that I think is very important to keep in mind, and this does vary by market and by approach to a certain degree, but in a lot of instances, especially in sort of consultative industries, blogging and inbound marketing is a long game. The benefits are measured in terms of 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, and things like that. So for that reason, I think a lot of times you need to have an assessment period for blogs to be done like twice a year or once a year, because otherwise you're not going to have enough potential data to assess the return on investment. And of course, it can vary by market, et cetera, but and the type of product you're selling and things like that. But a lot of times it's a longer stretch of time that you need to determine ROI. So this also means you have to have a willingness to like stick with it. I think that if you're looking at doing a blog, you're kind of telling your potential customers and audience, hey, this is something I'm gonna do regularly. This is something you're gonna be able to expect regular content from us. And it's not gonna just be this, withering branch, of your website that has no content and hasn't been updated since 2008 and things like that. Any other thoughts on ROI? Anyone else had experiences? Yeah.
Question.
Yeah.
So, say you did a blog, you measured it for 2 years,
Mm-hmm.
2.5 years, you're not happy with what you see. And so you decide to stop.
Yes.
So is that worse? I mean,
Well, I think there's graceful exits to that sort of thing. I think that you can announce to your, put a blog post up announcing, hey, we're going to be changing some of the ways and we're communicating with people, and for now we won't be publishing a blog, etc. I mean, respect your readers and your audience, let them know what's going on. I mean, you could also change the focus of it if it's not working and it's not delivering results. Yeah.
It's incredibly surprising how even some large organizations will, just the other day, some of the group that I was trying to get some contract work from, their last post was in 2012.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So what prevents them from just saying we're on hiatus or
at least something, right? Right.
Well, there's nothing, and we're gonna be talking about that. Like, I've got some recommendations for the volume of blog content to generate to yield a measurable result and things like that. You kind of get out what you put into it, I think, and the more you generate and the more commitment you make to it, the more likely it is that you're going to get some good return on your investment from it. It's kind of funny because especially in a lot of the consultative things, it could just be one client for the whole year that finds you because of your blog, but that client's going to spend $70,000 with you or 6 figures or whatever it might be, and then hey, then it's worth it. I did a blog for a whole year and I only got one damn client out of it, but that one client just paid for the whole blog effort and more. So that's kind of another reason why I kind of speak to the longer cycle, and it seems like blogging many times works well with sort of these consultative industries and where there's information that you need to get out rather than quick hit consumer goods and things like that. And so that's something to keep in mind, I think. One big I guess core rule of blogging that I would consider, and I think that this is a danger of writing in general and creating content in general, is that you want to speak to your audience. You don't want to speak to yourself or to your peers. You want to speak to your likely customers, your existing customers, and really kind of consider what they want to hear and what they want to see out of a blog. Excuse me one second. Beer's getting in the way.
So just a question.
Yes.
So you want to speak to them, do you want them speaking to you? So do
You
want-
can through the comments and things like that, and I mean you could have a suggestion box. Hey, what do you want us to write about? But most of the time I don't see customers or potential customers expending that much effort, to participate. They may have a follow-up question, or I would think that would go in the comments rather than something that they'd actively. Maybe I'm wrong. Yep.
And that's another thing. I was reading something recently. Just because you've got no comments for a particular blog or other aspects of your website, it doesn't necessarily mean that people aren't reading it.
Oh, absolutely.
Or thinking about you or something like that. So there are other ways to measure things, I guess. Right?
Yeah, raw web traffic is one way, and there's also a very, very small percentage of the actual number of users bother to go on and participate and comment and things. I mean, it's a percent. Did you have a comment or question?
Well, I was just going to say, I maintain a blog for sort of a high-end retail item.
Uh-huh.
And I've gotten 2 comments in the last 2.5 years.
Yeah.
But what it does for us is it personalizes us and allows the people within our organization to show a little of their personality and their individual stories in the creation of these products.
Oh, great. That's great. Sounds like good content. Yes.
But I bet if something went wrong with that particular product or service, you would get a lot of comments. That's what the action would be there. I mean, that happens
Well, and there's different ways to approach that. I mean, I think the more pragmatic and effective companies will address those issues head on. And if somebody posts a legitimate complaint and comments, ideally that company would step right up and say, we've recognized there are issues and we're working to correct it, or we're so sorry you had this negative problem and how can we make it better for you as our customer, or you do what's right. I mean, that's the most effective way to deal with it.
You've got a retail blog, so are you talking to buyers are you talking to buyers or are you talking to consumers?
Mostly consumers,
You are talking.
yes. It's a winery.
In a
Oh,
building
right,
loyalty
okay.
community kind of way?
What?
In a building loyalty kind of way? Or
Yes,
Or
and humanizing it, yeah.
Right.
Great.
Behind the scenes, how we build it,
Right.
how we make it.
Lots of stories, yeah.
Yeah,
That's great.
there's a lot. Everybody wants to know about this stuff.
That's right.
The end user.
One other thing that I think is important for thinking of a focus for a blog is considering the tone you adopt for the blog. When you're thinking about reaching out to your customers, you want to not only think of the rational and business appeals to what they want, you want to think about what type of people are you speaking to. Is your likely customer base a bunch of rich white old men who live out in the suburbs and play golf on the weekends and stuff like that? Or is it a bunch of inner city Latina single mothers? The language that you use, the things that you say, the opinions that you put forward, whether or not you use a little bit of spicy language or cursing in the blog, may all tie into whether or not that's going to turn off the demographics of those people, not necessarily the business case that you're trying to appeal to. So I think that that's another important thing to consider. So another thing to think about is, what are in terms of thinking about a focus for your blog, you may have thought on a bigger picture, what are your most effective types of marketing messaging as an organization? What types of advertising appeals have you thought through and figured out will be most effective for your customers? There's different ways to appeal to customers. In a business context, most of the time it's rational appeals, right? It's this product has more features and is more stable and will save you X amount of dollars and things like that, and can do these very specific things. But then there's also other ways to provide appeal. There's emotional appeals. There's a personal emotional appeals, which can speak to things like feelings of safety or fear or love, humor, ambition, things like that. There's social emotional appeals, things that speak to respect or embarrassment or authority. And then there's also different ways that you can cast these messages in terms of putting things that are aspirational. So you present a message that makes your customers think, I will ascend to this level of greatness thanks to Taylor Bruce, consulting, or wherever it might be. There's inadequacy marketing, where you can say, oh, you're gonna be sorry if you don't buy this. If you don't upgrade your Joomla site through our service, you're gonna be hacked, and your customers are gonna come to you with pitchforks and torches, and they're gonna burn down your office and carry your head away on a pike. Pretty scary, probably more scary than most business contexts. Educational, and actually I think educational messaging is great for blogs. It's part of especially with Joomla, it's part of the whole open source thing to kind of share knowledge and get knowledge out there. And so you can share the things that you've learned and that you know. And as Estelle mentioned before, there's also demonstrations of your competence. Things that say, we've done this, we had a success doing this type of thing. And so, these are big, broad, fuzzy areas, kind of thinking about your overall marketing and communication strategy, which might tie into ideas for blog focus. But if you kind of think through these things ahead of time, you'll know kind of the direction you want to push your blog message and topics and language into, and directions you don't want to push your blog topics into. If you know things that don't work from a marketing perspective for your target audience, then don't talk about it in your blog. Talk about the stuff that does. In a blog and in this type of marketing messaging, my take is you always keep things positive. You always keep things up. My shit don't stink. Even if I did release a product that caused flipper babies in 96% of, the people. Well, that's a feature, that's not a bug, I mean, of course that's terrible to say, but you understand what I'm saying. You want to keep the message, this is marketing speak. You never want to say anything bad about yourself. You always want to cast things in the most positive light. And now, so to think about an overall focus for your blog, an exercise that I think you can do to help you hone this down and keeping these points in mind is write yourself a subhead for your blog. So my blog title, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. What are the 4 or 5 words that describe what your blog does and what your blog says? Or maybe it's a couple sentences that does that. And it would be more than like, blog posts from protograph.com about things that I'm interested in. No, it's more like information and stories about Protograph successful projects and market information about the open source world or something like that. And so I think that might be a good way to get the gears going, force you to kind of think about what might be an overall general but specific enough focus for your blog. Okay, anybody have thoughts on all this focusing stuff? Any other ideas? Okay, am I completely a vile person for talking about flipper babies? Okay, well, sorry. Gotta be me. Gotta have a hobby, exactly.
Well,
Yeah.
Is there a fine line between, putting everything in a positive light and being pretty much honest with, especially
Well, you can-
blogs, but it's not 10 years ago anymore. People
Right.
are a little more sophisticated about what they want to do.
Well, I think that you can certainly say, oh, we had a very challenging time, and we know we've been having some problems with this, but with our hard work and our teamwork, we were able to overcome and yield a better service and product for our customer. Ultimately, this type of blogging is marketing speak. I suppose you could, if you wanted to leverage some Schadenfreude or something like that, and make an interesting story out of a funny circumstance. But your message always needs to be, if you're trying to convince the reader, hey, I should be getting in touch with these guys to do my stuff for me. It needs to be competence, good results in the end, happy end results. You're not going to write a blog post about the client project that crashed and burned because one of your employees embezzled a bunch of money from them or things like that. So again, maybe if you're doing a personal blog post, it might be a pretty good blog post.
This may be a little too far-fetched.
Sure.
Everyone was here, but from an artistic standpoint, the best responses we get are making ourselves vulnerable. And artists don't like you to see them in their crummy clothes and they're not off book on their strict fit and stuff. But that's what people, love. They love to see behind the scenes. They love to see Yo-Yo not break a strip. Fortunately, he's fine with that. But so the more we can get artists to show what they feel like is all the bad stuff that happens before the perfect concert, the more people feel engaged. But as much as people want that, people also go, "Ooh, their numbers are good." Like, I saw them; they don't have one musician. So it's you kind of sometimes have to protect people from themselves. But from an artistic standpoint, we do find that the more vulnerable you can make yourself, the more people become more loyal and they feel like part of you.
I just want a happy ending.
Yeah.
They still want a good concert at the end of the.
Well, people like to know what artistic choices are being discussed, and they would like to know, just that people are excited about what they have to show.
And you can discuss that welcoming people in. A lot of places don't want their readers to vote on which dance they should do and thing. You can speak from a position of authority, but people like to know, why did you do this or not this? Why don't you have more men in your company? Why didn't you use a saxophone with you last night?
Yeah, there are a few people who are really good at just relating to their audience, and it's wonderful to see.
Yeah.
Tony Hernandez from Looking Glass Theater was out in Las Vegas now, and I follow him on Facebook, and he's awesome. It's just the way that he brings his life to Facebook, knowing that he has an audience who are curious about what stunts he's working on, and then there's a lot of insider, like he's asking stuff about costumes and stuff. It was neat to see what people do on.
Fantasy camp for
Kind of, well, I think it's, sharing like make you feel like you're part of the creative process. So you want to go see the finished product.
Yeah.
Right? You want, so you don't want it to look like, oh my God, these people don't know what they're doing or they're at each other's throats. But it's really like, I love this community. I really want to go be part part of what they're doing. So,
Well, that's another aspect of blogs too. It can give you like a cool factor, and especially work in the arts, where you get a little bit more inside knowledge than just somebody just reading a review or seeing the.
Oh, absolutely. We tell a real story. You know, make personal connection, and it's very good stuff.
Corporate blogs I follow, their staff posts stuff on Friday, and it's like somebody's birthday, and they make a really cool cake because it's an artistic company or something. So it's a little insider, and their office savings thing isn't like, but it makes you feel a little gallant.
Yeah, there can be level. I mean, if I were a customer, I'd be like, I don't care if it's their birthday. I want my product or service on time. I mean, and but then again, it could also humanize it. So I could see there could be different crossover areas where you can kind of do that sort of personal stuff. Yeah, sure. Yeah, go ahead.
So for a while there, and maybe this is still true for maybe some conservative, maybe financial businesses or banks or law firms, but there is the blog that is sort of written by the executive director.
Yes.
Which really isn't, of course.
That's ghostwritten. Yeah.
But is that still a popular tactic or?
That's kind of more of a, see, a lot of times, you're not going to be able to go to the executive director and say, all right, executive director, we've determined the tone and the direction and what you should say and blah, blah, blah. Here's what you say. The director is going to be like, no, I want to talk what I want to talk about. And maybe it's very good, and usually they're just going to meddle. I mean, ask them to do once a quarter maybe or something like that, or if they're interested in it, maybe.
yeah, it works in two ways. It works in two ways. One is it works for search engine optimization because you are using your key phrases and feedback important content on your website with some questions. So that's really important from the perspective of SEO. And then the other way that it works is you can repurpose something like that in your email newsletter. And you can publish, the first paragraph or two and then say read the rest of it on the website.
Yeah.
So, and often, the click-through rate on that's pretty minuscule, but the point isn't what they said, it's that they said something. And there are like in insurance, people want to know how is healthcare reform going to affect my business. But everybody wants to know that. And they're hearing all different things. So that's a good right.
Expert
Opinion on something that people actually care about. And they're not going to get to your blog, but having that content going out on the blog gives you something to put out in your newsletter and social media outlets and those sorts of repurpose.
Yeah, Dennis.
This is a bit off topic, but I have a large corporation client, and I have not been in a large corporation in a long time. What are big organizations doing to communicate amongst their employees? Do they do the email blast? Do they do?
I mean, I've encountered all kinds of crazy stuff, man. I mean, it really kind of depends on, that's sort of a top-down thing, usually it's some of the top guys who are saying we need to enable better communication, and I'll push the following, mandated channels that you need to use.
So this customer I have, they do monthly, quarterly emails to all their thousands of employees. Is that what is generally done in large corporations?
I mean, I've seen, I've seen like case studies for like knowledge sharing portals and things that tie in community and stuff like that. And I think that the main, and why I say it needs to be led from the top down, is because there's a lot of overhead, just to manage and run that stuff and to make it effective. And there needs to be like a top-down commitment of resources and time.
But the emails are going out anyway. I'm just wondering, is the format advantageous? Should I recommend to them?
That they blog instead to their employees.
I think they'd be very good.
I mean, but because a lot of times with stuff like that with employees, it's like, all right, I'm busting ass for 8 hours a day, or assuming you're, it's a normal job and you're working hard, and you're like, here's another thing that I have to do. You need to get around that, and that's, I guess, why I say it needs to be managed. You have to introduce it. You need to demonstrate the benefit to the employees that they will get from participating and actually reading the stuff. There was that at Joomla Day Chicago 2012, there was that case study with that hospital that did the internal Joomla website. And so like most of their budget was spent on just educating people to use it, and getting people to actually go to the page and engage with it and use it, and they had to come up with internal marketing campaigns to push usage and specific things that they said, case studies to demonstrate the value of it, and people were starting to adopt it, but they really had to invest heavily to get the adoption.
So is it better than just to send your employees an email?
I mean, it's tough to answer that without knowing the type of industry and what their communication challenges are, and are their employees stealing stuff off the warehouse shelves, or are they just a little bit unmotivated in their sales tasks, or I mean, I guess a quarterly email update is kind of blah, but maybe that's all the time that their employees have to do. I mean, I guess my question would be, what do you want your employees, or what should these employees be doing instead of what they're doing now?
There was a story somewhere about a newspaper in a small town that makes a lot of money, and their theory is that people like to see their name in the
Yes,
paper.
in North Carolina.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if there's a basketball game, they name everybody who was there and everybody who played. If there was a car accident, there's everybody who was
Right.
in an accident. And so everybody buys the paper. And so I found, my husband works for a really big company, and the only time people read it is the month of their birthday to see if they're listed. But that gets them through, oh yeah, it's enrollment time for healthcare, and I've got to get my parking pass ready and stuff like that. So
Yeah, there's,
I did with artistic groups too, sometimes it's a shameless gimmick. Because people are pretty
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something you have not mentioned, but people do like to hunt for pictures for themselves when we talk.
oh yeah, and we're gonna talk about other types of blog content beyond just writing as well. Yeah. Let's go ahead and push the discussion on, because I wanted to talk about kind of what it takes to do an effective blog process, and kind of the volume of content you actually have to crank out to do an effective blog in this type of inbound marketing context. Understanding how much to blog, when to post updates, how to manage the process, and what else do you need to do. Now, there's a company called Savvy Panda. They're up in Milwaukee. They're kind of like a Joomla consulting agency, but they've started doing a lot of inbound consulting too, and I've been reading their blog and watching, or they give speeches regularly and did some Joomla Day presentations, and they have a lot of very deep understanding on what works in terms of inbound marketing. So I pulled some of these lessons from what they've recommended, as well as some other research that I've done on kind of like what works in terms of blogging. And yeah,
I
Matt.
was just gonna say they did a really good job posting the top 100 items for Joomla.
Yes.
Resources. So they just made a list of all the favorites.
That was one of their blog posts? Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah, so perfect example of utility content, gets passed around quite a bit, drives traffic to their site. So what they recommend, and what I've done in the past, is blog updates twice a week. Each blog updates 400 to 500 words per blog update. So that's the equivalent of up to 2 pages of double-spaced typewritten text for those old paper writers amongst us. And I have found, I kind of set up a schedule where I was doing blog posts on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I kind of do my big heavy hitting blog post on Tuesdays, because that's when a lot of usage occurs around the internet, on the internet, or at least in the markets that I was working in, where it was like business hours and things like that. That you may publish your blog posts at different times depending on when your market is likely to read them or want to read them. But I kind of did Tuesdays and Thursdays. Tuesday's also a big day for web traffic, and Friday's a total news hole. You publish anything on Friday, it's just forgotten by the end of the weekend. Now you want to keep in mind that there's more to just cranking out 1,000 words a week for your blog posts. Each blog post may also require intro copy that you have to write for it, a little introduction or abstract prior to the read more link in case of Joomla. That may be totally different than the actual content of the blog. And the first paragraph of the blog won't work in that context, so you got to write your own little intro copy. You got to come up with a good headline, supporting images, cut lines, other types of information. You also need to monitor and participate in comments. We talked about how comments were a key part of blogs. And so you want to, respond as quickly as you possibly can. Anything that's crap that gets in there, any spam or I don't know, disparaging remarks or things like that. You want to get out of there immediately, and then you also want to post your own responses as quickly as is reasonable. I would recommend like a liberal commenting policy to allow more comments and maybe more spam that you have to deal with, rather than real strict hoops that the user has to jump through in order to post a comment. Just because I think that getting that participation is hard, and the easier you make it, it's going to be better than the cost of just erasing spam messages. I also recommend integrating it with social media accounts, so someone could post to your blog comments using or authenticating against Facebook and using their Facebook account or their Twitter account or whatever it might be. And there's all sorts of software tools that allows for that sort of integration that work with Joomla. So blogging can represent a significant work commitment, 1,000 words a week, 4,000 words a month. Doing blog posts. You can write stuff, and does anybody here do some writing? And sometimes you get to the point where you can just poop it out and crank it out and just go real fast. But I find that the things that are really good and interesting and that matter tend to take more time. So I usually peg between 2 to 4 hours of writing time per blog post. So 48 hours per week or 16 to 32 hours per month, just for doing this. This is an intensive blogging. This is twice a week. This is a lot of content. But again, we're kind of talking about this in the context of an inbound marketing campaign and doing things that will really get some results. What about editing? The traditional publishing process, the writer writes something and it goes up the pipe to the editor, who checks it for grammar and other issues and fact checks and all that sort of stuff. Well, in blogging, I think editing is a real luxury, and you probably won't find that as an option, unless you're in a real big marketing and communications department that will support it. It's really nice to have that. It's nice to have someone look at your content and go over it and work with you to improve it, but you probably won't be getting that. I also noticed too that in general in online media, everything's getting sloppier. I don't know if you guys look at the Chicago Tribune's website or the Sun-Times or any of these newspapers. I mean, there's slop in there. Let me tell you, when I was a copy editor, I would have been, slapped around the newsroom and hung out to dry if some of the crap had been allowed to slip through that now is very, very commonplace in the media. So there's a lot more tolerance for sloppier standards. That being said, it is, you still want to portray yourself professionally, and you still want to have as highest writing and consistent standards as you can. What about review and approval of blog posts? You write a blog post, you want it to be captivating, and maybe there's a controversial aspect of it. Does your boss or a higher up in your organization need to approve the blog post before it goes live? Does that have to happen every time? Does that only happen for certain subject matter, which might be sensitive, or who knows? But you need to figure that out as well. And then don't forget the overhead related to comments. You want to immediately respond to problems and fast follow-ups to good comments and questions. A lot of these commenting systems have an automated email alert, so anytime a new comment is posted, it sends out an email to the system listed email or the person who wrote the blog post. And so that's a real good way to stay on top of what's going on with the comments. And so, looking at all of this just, kind of content. Well, I'm sorry, I skipped over a couple things. There's also the blog production, laying out and publishing it in the content management system. You got to take the content that's written, put it into the blog. This could be very quick and painless, copy and paste, but it's still going to take 15, 20 minutes per blog post. If you got a couple images that need to go in there, maybe need to be resized in Photoshop or whatever, that's more time, so you want to count on time for that. And also, depending on your production cycle, you may need to decide, who does what. Is the writer just writing the blog content and then it gets handed off to the marketing person who decides the headline? Or is it, there's going to be some other division of labor? So potentially at this level of blogging, at this level of intense commercial blogging, you're talking about a potential commitment of dozens of person hours a month to produce a blog. You can certainly do less content, but then arguably this is less effective because you're not producing as much content. So that's a big spend. That's a lot of time to spend on this thing, and that's why it's very important to track the costs and compare it against the benefits, so that when whatever higher up or your boss or whoever says, why are we spending so much damn money on this blog, you can say, well, here, it more than paid for itself last year because we got 3 new top tier clients based on what we've been doing with the blog. It's slow, but it yields results. So how do you manage all of this work? You know, this is a lot of work. A lot of folks here may be more technical, may not be coming from an editorial end of things. You know, I know you can outsource a lot of this blogging stuff. I actually have very little experience with it. I was wondering if anybody here has tried outsourcing any blogging or any writing, anything like that. You know, my take on it is that even if you were to outsource a lot of this blogging stuff, the writer would still need to spend so much time communicating with the people internally to find out what relevant things to write about. You may as well just about write it internally. Of course, you know, if you don't have any internal staffers who can write well, you may want to get like a ghostwriter or get someone involved who can spruce things up in that regard. But in terms of straight up outsourcing, you know, I don't think it's really viable to like go, okay, well, I have this guy in India write my blog, because he's probably not going to do a very good job. He's not going to understand your business, and he's going to spend a bunch of time trying to talk to you to figure out what to write about. Or you can spend a lot of money and have a full-blown marketing agency come in and say, we're going to get into bed with you, and we're going to do your blog, and we're probably also going to be doing a bunch of other stuff with you too. But we're going to be working with you on an ongoing basis over, you know, the course of however many years. So we're going to understand you, understand your business. We're going to be able to do all this stuff for you. Pretty expensive. Assuming you are doing it internally, one of the key tools that I found for it is an editorial calendar. All right, writing down what you're going to publish when, a list of potential planned blog topics and their target publish dates. This can also include who's responsible for doing what, who's writing it, who's editing it, if anybody, who's handling production, who needs to approve it, and any other related production tasks. You can put in your editorial calendar anything else you might want to track, like publication status, the keywords that maybe you want to target for a particular blog post, etc. There are a whole lot of online tools to allow for editorial calendar planning, and there's like software as a service websites, there's downloadable open source software, all different sorts of things specifically for editorial calendars. You can also use general project planning tools as well. And I've found the simplest, cheapest, and easiest way to do this, Google Docs. You know, set up a shared Word or a shared spreadsheet or shared document or whatever. Give everybody who needs access to it, and everybody can see what's going on. Someone's managing it, someone's writing down what's getting published when, but everybody can see what's happening, and then also participate, add their own information. You know, there may be other sort of professional level editorial things that you want to leverage into this, like for example, a style book. You folks have probably heard of AP Style or the Chicago Manual of Style. Basically, you want all of your communication to be consistent. You know, do you put a comma before and, or the what is it? Not a run-on and, a series. Thank you. Yes. Do you put a comma before your series or not? You know. Really doesn't matter one way or the other as long as you're consistent with all of your messaging. So by adopting one style book, you say this is the way we're going to handle these issues consistently. And then there may be, you know, you probably have your own style book specific rules, like we always talk about this product name in this certain way. On first usage, we use the full name and then in parentheses the acronym. And then every other usage on that page, the acronym. And so, you know, by doing these sorts of things, it establishes, you know, an air of professionalism, and, you know, you want readers to just suck in the information and not stumble over inconsistencies that they might notice and get distracted by. So that's the purpose of style books and things like that. Also, you know, pro level thing, I guess, would be this editing process. You know, if you get an editor as a blogger, lucky you. You won't. So, you know, looking at this advanced planning and this, you know, topics and things like that, and having this editorial calendar will allow you to kind of look at this range of topics and allow a bunch of different people to look at the topics and make sure that you're hitting on the messages that you want to hit on and talking about the things that you should be hitting on. And maybe you're getting perspectives from across the organization and not just from, you know, the person who's writing the blog. Okay, so anybody else have any techniques for managing blogging that they'd want to share? Yeah?
For the comments, if you do have it
Yep.
open, you can just make it so you approve it before it gets posted.
Right, so you have to, the comment doesn't go public
Yeah.
until you actually read it and approve
Then
it.
it's all in the back end.
Right, and so they just, yeah, yeah. And I would say that, you know, in that type of situation, it's even more important to stay like, you know, to approve something as quickly as possible. Because if someone takes the time to submit something, you know, and it doesn't get posted for a week or whatever, you know, it'd probably turn them off. So you'd probably want to, usually you'd want to have somebody responsible for monitoring the email account and say, problems get dealt with immediately, responses get posted, or, you know, within a day or something like that.
I'd say it's more frequent. I mean, people aren't really commenting, but they're more sharing. So just having all the different share buttons available for their personal social media
Right.
outlet.
Oh, okay. That's a great. Actually, yeah, that's another
So
good
like
characteristic.
Facebook, a LinkedIn, a
Right.
Google Plus, just having them available because everyone uses something different.
And that's probably another one of those key characteristics that I forgot to list was all those social media links as like something that you often see
And
in a
having
blog.
other people share it on their pages, like, makes your reach go up exponentially.
One thing, thank you. One thing I wanted to talk about too is generating ideas for your blog. So we got the overall focus, we got a kind of, you've maybe got a plan for how often you want to blog, you know who you want to speak to, roughly the types of messaging you want to say, and you've got an idea of the outcomes you want to get. So how do you think about, you know, what you're actually going to write about? One thing I think you should do is draw a distinction between blog posts and something which is like a news item or more of a press release type item. You know, press releases are announcements about specific business-related or organizational-related things. They're usually in this formal structure. They're presented in a certain way. They're always third person. They're kind of formal. And a lot of times those are just for general announcements. So like if I had a general announcement about something that was just happening, you know, I would just put that in the latest news. But then I might use the blog area to talk, you know, why we're doing this thing. Or how it might benefit us, or how it might benefit the customer, things that aren't specifically discussed in the press release. So blog topics should take all the customer appeal and targeting elements into account. And then, you know, I thought we could just kind of help people generate ideas, come up with lists of ideas for things we could write about, you know. So one of the things you can write about is like the things that you do, you know. So I'm just going to be real basic, and I'm going to, you know, you guys can yell out ideas too, and I'm going to keep this, it starts out very general. Oh, thank you. So, you know, things you do or produce. Product services. Okay. What are we building? What are we building now? What are we building tomorrow? What are we, you know, discontinuing or about to do, or why did we do these things? You talk about things your customers do, right? How they used your stuff. NGS. You know, success stories that they've had, challenges that they've overcome, why they chose you instead of a competitor. Talk about things going on in the market, you know. So, you know, what's coming up? What's the latest range of products and services that are being offered for a particular market? Things that you've talked about in the past. So, hey, you know, last month we talked about, you know, this blog topic. Let's see how it's going this month. Or we talked last year about how we released a new product. Let's discuss it. These are all very general areas because it could relate to a range of things depending on your industry and what you're doing. Some specific ideas for blog content. I thought, for example, one thing that could be fodder for good blog content are events, right? Anything you're doing, anything you're participating in, if a employee is involved in some sort of speech, or if you're hosting something or presenting something, you can talk about this in the blog and again go beyond more this announcement type of stuff. But to get more mileage out of it, well, you don't want to just talk. This isn't just one blog post per event. You can do before, all right, during, and after. Okay, so now I get 3 blog posts for one event,
Do corporate websites get as much bang as other venues from cross-promoting? Because I would think one thing about talking about an event is not just my product, but the event promoter and the other people who are speaking.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you can syndicate your blog post, your content as well. Like if you write something and say, hey, why don't you also post this as a guest blog post on your blog? That's. I mean, Avery, do you have any thoughts on the corporate bang for the buck for?
We find, yeah, I mean, getting people to doing guest blogs and giving and getting guest blogs is really a big deal. Don't forget, talking about Medill, is the integrated marketing communications. A lot of what you're doing is talking to your own people. So we did some blog posts based on some video content the client had. So they did a big video content and we said break it up and then we'll do blog posts on each of the pieces. And we wrote the articles, the VP of marketing wrote the headers, the intro and the ending for each of those. So it had her personal voice in it. And then but the primary audience ended up being their internal people. We looked at the Google Analytics data afterwards. And it was talking to their own people, getting their own people engaged with their own messaging.
So and that was a part of their goal?
Yeah. It was in the public blog, but most of the traffic coming to it was from outside, or from inside the campus.
Sure.
I think some other things you can think of too are like, editorial ideas like interviews, profiles on people, product service launches or changes, any key personnel changes. When I come up with an idea and I want to expand on it and I want to write about it, one technique that I found very effective is I will write myself a list of 20 questions about that topic or different ways to approach it. And I do who, what, when, where, why, and how, right? Very basic. I think of the topic and I think, okay, who are the players in this and who is involved in these certain areas? What are they doing? Why is a really good thing for blog content as well? What's the reasoning behind this? And that might be things that aren't in other types of literature. How, telling a story about how something's accomplished and getting some personal voice in there is great as well. And so that's, a lot of times that will spur a lot of these ideas to generate the raw content for a single blog post, and then it's much easier to write. Now, we mentioned before, blog posts don't have to be just text. They can be, you could have photo galleries, and we talked about the appeal of people's photographs. I think there could also be video blog posts if it was a video interview or video content that was nicely produced and printed as a blog post. There could also be an audio interview or something like that.
I'm hearing that term is new to me until 2 months ago, but I was hearing the term vlog.
Yes. And if you've got, I've been doing like family stuff on video these days, and Matt and his company does tons and tons of stuff. You guys do this stuff all the time, but it's getting, whether you go with a company or whether you're doing it yourself, it's becoming much more accessible to do really good looking things. I think with going with a pro company, you'd get a lot more of a polished appearance. But I don't know, my Kerchong.com baby videos are pretty popular amongst the family set, and it's not. And I guess my point is, it's not that difficult to put together and get loaded. One thing that I will say for about all the multimedia content is, Google can't index any of this stuff, right? So you want to be sure, or can it?
They do.
Okay, but can they do? Because what I was going to say is, you need to have a bunch of text content accompanying. So if you have images from an event, you want cut lines with the person's names, with that. If you have a video sequence or an audio sequence, maybe you have a written transcript that's also provided with it. I mean, there's still no technology that actually indexes the content of multimedia, right?
Plus, if you have,
Next step, there is multimedia.
Yes.
if you have it in a couple formats, it also depends on where you are. If I'm somewhere, if I'm in a boring presentation and I wanna see something and it's only audio, I'm not gonna watch it.
Right.
But, not that I do this all the time, but then if they've got it allows you to, again, function in the way you like to function, which is, tends to be the media most.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that that's handy too. It gives people the option for how they want to interact with the content. Yeah,
I
Matt?
was gonna say, it's something we do for our clients who manage their social media, is never have a post without a picture. Never ever
Right.
have a post without some sort of visual aspect, because they're gonna need a lot more attention. It takes up more room in social media, and also you can put metadata in the picture to boost your SEO as well.
Right, and a lot of times, even if it's just accompanying illustration,
Yeah.
it kind of jazzes it up.
So always put a metadata, and that'll boost your SEO.
Great.
for your blog as well.
I think it's also possible to get blogging ideas by looking at other media, publications in your market and industry, seeing what people are talking about. And then one thing that we've done in the past pretty effectively is, again, a shared Google Doc where we just have a big idea list of blog topics. And everybody can go in there and add their own ideas and kind of rank them, and then they move from the idea list to the editorial calendar. Last thing I wanted to talk about was kind of the ideas for how to leverage your blog content. And again, I'm not a super expert in this area, so it'll be interesting to get some perspectives from the guys who've been working in this areas for social media. But to me, blogging is often or the source of an organization's most current content, and is possibly its most expansive content too. If you've been generating 1,000 words a week for a year, you're going to have a lot of blog content. Or Avery, you're talking about how people can turn their blogs into books and other types of resources and things like that. It also has a characteristic, I think, of being original. It's something unique to that particular venue, unless you happen to share it or syndicate it in certain ways. But it's ideally as a piece of original or a collection of high quality original content. Because of this, the way that I interrelate blog content with social media is I kind of think of blogging content as like my gold premium stuff, and I use social media as the channels to lure people in and lure them back to my website, to my landing pages and other conversion points where I can turn them into customers. So I will use Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn to talk about the latest blog post that I've just published, and also maybe give them a little bit of teaser content, or maybe in the case of a photo, just one photo from the photo gallery of the event or something like that. But they have to go to your website in order to get the goods and get the full blown picture. That's my, and I think that it's, that approach is most appropriate or often works, both because I view these social media channels as kind of being most effective when used in that way, and also because of the licensing issues and the fact that if you do spend a bunch of money on your blog and blog related content, a lot of times if you do upload the entire content to Facebook, you're giving them a non-exclusive license to do whatever they want with it. They probably won't, but who knows? Your users are also in their ecosystem, and maybe there are conversion points you can integrate into it and get them to become customers. But it seems to me like most of the time the conversion takes place on the end organization's or company's website. And would you guys say that's the case? Yeah? I mean, that's kind of what I've seen. I've never really seen a Facebook conversion tool.
There are people who are salespeople who use Facebook for their network going.
Right, yeah, there's that, but
That keeps them top of mind with
another thing that I think is good too, and we touched on this before, is connecting comments to social media accounts. So someone comments on your blog post, and I know Joomla technology supports this, or there's certain Joomla extensions, it'll propagate that comment to their Facebook homepage or their Facebook timeline as well. so you get more people finding you through their friends, contacts. I could also see how, I've used blog content in the past for customer support issues. I talk about, for example, ways to learn about technology or the importance of keeping your Joomla software up to date, and you're talking to a client about it or a potential client. You could say, hey, we've written about this, here's the link, check it out. And then I also think that there might be opportunities to syndicate blog content in certain circumstances where you put a lot of time and effort into a particular blog post. You can go to a different high-value venue and say, hey, do you also want to run this? I did that with the Selling Joomla article where the Joomla Community Magazine ran after it had already appeared on Protograph Interactive. And, so there's, those are the ways that I see you can best leverage your blog content. Ultimately, you want to get this end result. You want to get a conversion. You want to get customers out of it. But in terms of how it relates to social media, I see, social media is my bitch, and I'll, use it as much as I want, and will only give it as much as it deserves, and no more. But I want to get people back to my website ultimately, and convert them from being users to customers through the blog. So yeah.
So, I guess you're not as an advocate if you've seen like blogger.com or Discuss or Twitter.
Well, I don't think, I haven't. I guess because I've been more technically proficient, I've always been able to install it and build it myself. Although, you were doing a Tumblr blog, right? Okay, so tell us about that.
Well, it's very new, so I'm definitely the new person. But in terms of small, it's an Etsy site, and looking at how to promote around the world, around the clock, to the people who are my market. So the first thing I try to figure out is, I think I'm a very difficult market to reach. I don't read paper, and I don't subscribe to a bunch of stuff. The way I find out about stuff is word of mouth. So I really wanted to find that outlets that work word of mouth wise. And Tumblr is the only blogging site I was already following because this one blog I followed the rest of it. So I did some research into demographics and started using it. And it's just really out of the box. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. The goal for me was communication, not a larger integration goal. And that netted, plus a kind of a pyramid of my Tumblr, my Etsy site, to my Twitter account, to my Facebook page. So some things go all the way down the chute, but Facebook's at the bottom, and I have only about 120 Facebook friends, and so I really guard.
Wouldn't you be it seems like you'd be at a disadvantage using a third-party blogging platform because you wouldn't be able to track the analytics as specifically as you would want to, and you wouldn't be able to. There probably are ways to build conversion points, certainly into Blogger, right, where you can kind of build your own WordPress site. Yeah.
I use Blogger. I don't blog super regularly. It's just a hobby for a side business. But I'm not super technical, but the analytic tools that they provide are good enough for me. Like I said, it's not a commercial blog, so it's not probably the analytics a company would want. But
my impression for a lot of those services is they tend to be more casual blogs and less, more personal blogs and less, business related.
Well, Tumblr's that's a great use of Tumblr. It's a hybrid blog and social platform. So you actually, it kind of builds in the following and all that. Blogger offers a lot of those components as well. So you kind of get some benefit of it.
But
WordPress.com, because
right.
then you get no benefits except that it's free hosting for a WordPress blog.
Well, when you're recommending blogging for your customers, do you ever recommend a third-party site, or is it always going to be? Well, yeah. Well,
They're doing it to build search engine optimization.
Okay, sure,
sites, so
sure.
But they might do Tumblr, or they might do. They definitely do Twitter.
Sure.
Pinterest is very popular.
Sure.
So the expressly social media works really well for them, and Instagram, especially if we were with a theater company, I'm like, get on Instagram and post stuff.
Sure. Dressing room shots.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Very popular.
Yeah, we've got business just through Tumblr before, like people looking at our pictures, and then that'll backlink
cool.
to either other social media outlets that we have, and people have just reached out and like, oh, I love your video or your photo. When can we do a video
And it sounds like those are more one-off
Really,
pieces of media rather than like a blogging campaign as applied to Tumblr, or is
I
it?
mean, it's that rule that we should always have in the back of our head, and I remember it's this: create once and post everywhere.
Right.
So just literally as many that you can manage. Try to post something, because someone will find you. That's good.
Great. Well, that's I covered everything that I wanted to cover. Does anybody have any questions or topic or anything else we should talk about with blogging, or? Yeah.
I did something yesterday. So one of my friends, he's running a company, a Kickstarter campaign, and I mean, I didn't really see anything on Built in Chicago that they had posted, so I just wrote a guest blog for their campaign.
Oh,
I
nice.
just want to help out my friends. I've no investment in the business besides I want to see them succeed. But we've had huge response.
This is in builtinchicago.org.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was up early, like 6 a.m. It's early for me. But I'm like, I want to help these guys out, so I wrote a blog about their article they had. So summarize in my own words, put some like bullet points, but it had like over 500 views in the first 12 hours. So
That's great.
it's pretty cool.
That's great. It'd be interesting to see how many click through to their site, and how many click through from their site to the landing page.
Well, and so
Maybe.
far they've already had, I think, 3 more people donate money since.
Oh, that's great.
For them.
Awesome.
So keep promoting that.
Sounds-
Sounds the best.
Yeah, and I actually use
Cross-promoting.
Built in Chicago. It's actually a Drupal site built by Drupal guys, but they're very nice guys. And it's a nice site. It's builtinchicago.org. It's a startup thing. I actually posted this event on their calendar to kind of help spread the word. Yeah. Oh. All right, well, thanks everybody so much for coming and participating. Really appreciate you coming to Joomla Chicago Loop, and we'll be back next month.